would come, and it would happen, and I would bleed. And at 9 years old, I was told that if I told anybody, any of you, or school, or mama, that my life would be taken, and her life would be taken in front of me. So at that point, I became Mama's silent guard, and I trusted God. And that same little girl, after each beating and breaking of another bone, I ran to the woods. And in my child mind, those woods, there was this beautiful lighting there in the oak trees out behind Mama's. And I smiled because it's still, I'm sure it's still there. But as a child, your child mind is so different than your adult mind. To me, in those woods, that's where God lived. So after something bad would happen, I would run as hard and fast as I could to go sit in those woods. And I talked to God. And I begged him to save me. And I begged him to save Mama. He did eventually. And I kept going to those woods. And I'll tell you, I kept going to those woods till I was 45 years old. I kept going. Because he's still there, and he's still here. And I thank all of you, because during that verbal abuse, I would come here on Sunday. You didn't know that I had bruises. You didn't know that I had scars. But every one of you, I don't know how many times Joanne has hugged me in my childhood, and Karen has said a kind word, and you don't know what that did for me. That refueled me for the next week, because at home, I was hearing, "You're nobody. You should have never been born. You were a mistake." And I heard that my entire life. And I believed it. But when I walked in this church, I was loved. And I've carried that love with me for all my life. I've been here my whole life. I also had a complete revelation, a full circle moment. When I went to middle school, we had a wonderful man, when you can still talk about God in school, Ken Helser. I don't know if any of you are aware of Mr. Helser. He's an incredible person. And we had an assembly that day, and afterward, I started going back to my class, feeling like I, unseen, whatever. And right above my bruise on my arm, out of nowhere, he touched my arm. And he had no idea what he knew. And he said, "You're going to be all right. You're going to do things." I didn't understand. But he told me he was going to be all right. This man of God told me I was going to be all right. And I trusted him. Now let's fast forward, and then we'll go back again, because I like to flip-flop. In 2015, you would think as a grown woman I wasn't still being abused, but verbally, financially, I was. And my abuser wanted to have a word with me. And previous to that, on Facebook, a high school friend had put on Facebook, "Hey everybody, remember Ken Helser?" And I was the first one on the bandwagon. "Yeah, I remember." And they said, "You got to hear this song. It's the greatest song. His son is a recording artist." And I'm like, "What?" Little Jonathan David Helser. But he's not little anymore. No longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. And I heard that song, and I wept. And I wept, and I wept. Because I was no longer a slave to fear. I had nothing to fear. I had God. I'd had God all that time. And I didn't know it. And I didn't know as a little girl in middle school that as a grown woman, Ken Helser and his son would pop back up in my life. But that's just a testament to what God knows exactly what he's doing. He puts these people in our lives for a reason. I'm still kind of questioning my marriage choices, but other than that, and the fact that Bishop's a different college basketball team than me, but we won't get into that in a Methodist church. But, you question sometimes. Why? What? And when you see the full circle of me being here this morning, after being here 44 years ago, being baptized, I'm here again. I'm alive. I also in middle school had a remarkable happening. You get pretty good at disguising, and as the kid would say, I'm putting a filter on, but you learn to hide You hide the bruises, you hide the pain. You become the class clown, whatever it takes. And that's me. I was in the cafeteria one day, and it was warm. It was springtime. I was trying to keep my sleeves pulled down. And she didn't want anything to show. You had to be aware. You had to be on eggshells all the time. I couldn't come here. I had to, if there was a bruise, I had to keep it down. And I happened to have a handprint right here. So I had my sleeve down, and as I was taking for my lunch, I had my tray, and I realized, oh no, it was horrible. It was showing. My bruise was showing. And I panicked, looking around, making sure nobody saw. Somebody saw. She took my hand. She raised her sleeve. She showed me her bruises too. From that minute on, we became sisters. She's still my life today. She's one of the strongest, most faithful people that God placed in my life.
Just can't do it.
She is the epitome of what a friend is to be. Your friend in Christ, your sister in Christ. And I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful she's here. She's probably going to smack me for saying that, but she's here. She was a little late, but that's okay. Love her anyway. But that's a testament to when God places people. You don't know. It's incredible. I do want to tell you, and this one's hard, when I was 17, each time in abuse that things happened, I felt like it was going to be the last time. And I don't mean it would stop. I meant that my end would come. And at 17, typical teenager, y'all probably remember, spunky, outspoken, and I'd said one wrong word. And I got pulled down 14 steps. I know there's 14 because I was a kid and I counted them because it was fun. 14 steps by my hair. I was slung up against the oven, and then the beating ensued. I was kicked, I was punched, I was hit. My ribs were breaking, my face was breaking, and a belt buckle went across my mouth, and my mouth burst open. I started blacking out, and I knew this was it. It was over. I started praying. Didn't have to make it quick. I knew who my Savior was, and I was ready to go home. But that didn't happen that way. There he was again. Every time I used to think, oh, no, this is it. But I kept getting back up. And I thought, how am I able to get back up? And that night was a horrible night. It's probably the worst violence I've ever seen in my life, in my experience. But I got back up. And I could see that it infuriated my abuser that I got back up. And that I kept getting back up. Still getting back up. But that night I carried a lot of scars, emotionally, mentally, physically. I missed church that Sunday, and that was a big deal. We didn't miss. And so I didn't come because Mom knew that I would be embarrassed for y'all to see. And I don't think she could have handled it mentally either because she was being abused as well, not physically, but emotionally and financially. So we missed church, and that was a big deal. So then we had to bring Mimi into it, and then Mimi found out. And Mimi's prayers got a lot harder. The verbal was always there. It was there till I was 45 years old. I was verbally abused. Anything I did was wrong. I tried sports, I tried academics, nothing. And I kept